Do you remember in high school or college when it came for that time that everybody dreaded, when it was time to give a speech in class? And I hated those moments. I used to get so nervous when it was time for me to present in front of the class. In fact, I would often skip my assigned day so that I could be moved to the makeup day in front of less people. However, there was one thing I enjoyed about class speeches: all the mistakes people made. Watching a horrible speech makes me feel good about all the mistakes I make. But if you talk in public much, there's nothing you can do about it. You are going to say things you wish you could take back. And I remember the first several times I did announcements on Sunday nights. And there is nothing worse to do than announcements. Why? Because when you do really, really well, nobody is listening. But when you mess up, everyone is listening. And 5 years ago, new to the team as a pastor here at First and LR, I was still super nervous to get up on stage. I prepared my announcements like I always do, but there are just some things you don't write down. And everything was going well, and it was finally time to take up the offering, pray, and be done. And that's when it happened. As I was calling the ushers forward to receive our tithes and offering, I said, "I'd like my ushers to come forward." Great, I messed up. But not a lot of people caught it. But it didn't just happen once. It became a tradition that every time I did Sunday night announcements, I would say, "my ushers." And before you knew it, on Sunday nights when I would sit down after doing announcements, I'd look down at my phone to see 20 text messages saying, "We didn't know that the ushers belonged to you." If the ushers belong to anybody, it's Pam Harrell. And if you want to know some really funny mistakes, you just need to come to kids ministry. I mean, once at prayer time, I told the kids to bow or to close their heads and bow their eyes. And I wondered why they were confused during the prayer. Pastor Gary also had a great moment. He was telling the kids how amazing it was that the Son of Jesus died for their sins. I'm not sure what version of the Bible he was teaching from. But my all-time favorite is one of our class pastors, Pastor Ray Bob, at a Metro service. And he was telling the kids about how we've all messed up. We've all made mistakes, and we're going to make mistakes. He told them, even I have broken all of the 10 commandments. In case you're wondering, he hasn't. Thinking about all those mistakes reminds me that it happens to everyone. It makes me feel a little bit better about myself. But I also love listening to an amazing speaker. Someone who captivates a crowd with words and the force of their personality. I love speeches that stir emotion, captivate attention, and make you want to go out and do something amazing. And the Bible is full of amazing speeches delivered by passionate, committed leaders and heroes. And today we look at one of my favorite speeches from the Bible, and not from a king or a general, but by a young shepherd boy. And David's speech was undoubtedly inspired by God, and his words set the stage for one of the greatest upset victories of all time. It's not a long speech, just 124 words long, but it's filled with meaning. If you're facing a big challenge, a struggle, a giant in your life, make this speech your declaration and your prayer. And before we look at the speech, let me give you the setting. The Israelites and the Philistines were at war. David was sent to the front lines to take food to his brothers. And when he got there, he found an unusual situation. The two armies were camped on opposite sides of a huge valley. And every day, at the same time, a giant named Goliath came out and issued a challenge to the Israeli army for one man to face him in a representative battle. If Goliath won, Israel was defeated. If Goliath lost, then the Philistines were defeated. For 40 days, Goliath issued his challenge. And for 40 days, the Israelites ran away in fear. And David couldn't believe the army of the living God was intimidated by one man. David decided to fight Goliath himself. So David went out to fight Goliath with the slingshot and 5 stones. And Goliath had a huge spear and a massive sword. He was covered in armor from head to toe and was led by a shield bearer carrying a huge man-sized shield. And you can imagine the tension as David and Goliath approached each other. Walking down the hill toward the ravine, Goliath took one look at David and started hurling insults. He looked David over and saw he was only a boy, ruddy and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I'll give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." In my imagination, when that speech was done, the Philistine army roared in approval. They were ready for the slaughter. David listened, but now it was his turn. Instead of curses or insults, David made an incredible speech, one of the most powerful passages in the entire Bible. The valley grew quiet as David cleared his throat to speak. And remember, they were at the bottom of a ravine, a natural amphitheater. So the hills carried the echoes of David's voice to both armies. The speech was directed at Goliath, but it was intended for the entire Israelite army to hear. Years later, soldiers would tell grandchildren of this speech. If it happened today, it would be all over the internet within hours. In these words, we get a glimpse at the mindset of a giant defeating champion. In just 124 words, David gives us 8 powerful principles for fighting giants. David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. Today I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." Wow. What a powerful speech. Now look one more time at the first verse in the speech. David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin." And at first glance, you might think this was a lack of faith. The way some people teach is David should have said, "You're not a giant. You don't have weapons." Well, that would be stupid. Everyone could see the giant in his weapons. First principle, identify your giant. Acknowledge the truth. Admitting the truth exists doesn't in any way mean you don't have faith. Instead, it sets the stage for a miracle. In all through the New Testament, Jesus asks people, "What do you need? What do you want me to do for you?" Jesus knew what they needed. He knew they were blind, crippled, or had leprosy, but he still said, "Hey, tell me what you need." Admitting your need, acknowledging the truth, is not a negative confession. It's identifying the giant in your life that must be defeated. David said, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel." And David said, "You got some pretty impressive weapons, but guess what, Goliath? I may not have all that stuff that you have, but I've got something better. I've got an almighty God." And David reminded the giant and all of Israel who was on his side. And this is so interesting to me. David served the same God as all of the other Israeli soldiers. But David had a different perspective of his God. David saw God as God Almighty. David saw God as an all-powerful, undefeated, undeniably great God. And David's different God perspective gave David a different perspective on Goliath than the other soldiers. David didn't run away in fear. Remember, Goliath was still a giant. He was still an imposing presence. And there wasn't a guy in the Philistine camp or probably in the Israelite camp who would have bet on David. But David didn't need their backing. He needed God. And David believed his God was bigger than a spear or a sword. David served a big God, the Lord Almighty. And David's giant perspective of God made Goliath seem like a midget instead of a giant. Your perspective of God determines your view of the circumstance. Listening, you can discover how big people believe God is. Acknowledge the truth, but then remember the God who is on your side. I'm sick, but my God is able to heal. It may look impossible, but I serve a God who specializes in the impossible. It may look like I'm defeated, but my God is able. I'm an addict, but my God delivers addicts. It may look over, but my God promised to supply all my needs. You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. And David let Goliath know, this isn't just about me and you. You're not taking on me, Goliath, you're taking on God. And with this one statement, David reframed the battle. Goliath had not just defied David or Israel, but God. And what an important principle. Recognize the spiritual aspect of your battle. Your giant isn't just coming against you. It is also coming against the God you serve. This is not an isolated, coincidental attack. This is a concentrated attack of the enemy against God and his plan for your life. And why does this matter so much? When you realize the battle is not just against you, but also against God, you're reminded who is on your side. Now, I understand there is a balance point here. And some people blame the devil and demons for every problem they have. I'm not sure every flat tire, untied shoelace, dirty diaper, or sniffle is caused by Satan. But I am convinced that Satan is behind the giant obstacle that stands between you and your God-ordained assignment. David continued his speech to Goliath. He said, this day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head today. And David made a huge statement of faith. David expected to win. David was saying, you've had your fun for 40 days. But today, everything changes. Today, Goliath, you are going down. Expect victory. Face your giant with faith. Expect to win the battle with God's help. You can almost feel the tension building between the two armies. Every coach knows you don't make big, bold statements before the pivotal game because it just fires up the enemy. Israel had to be thinking, shh, David, stop it. All you're going to do is make him mad. But David didn't care if Goliath was fired up or not. And I'd give anything to see David trash-talking a giant. This day, the Lord will hand you over to me, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. Today, I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth. And Goliath threatened David that the birds and the animals would eat his dead body. And David let Goliath know, the exact plan you have for me is what's going to happen to you and all your buddies. God is going to turn it around. And I love this lesson. What the enemy intends for you will instead be his fate. Satan intends to destroy you. Instead, that will be his ultimate fate. Satan intends to discourage you. You will discourage him. Satan intends to stop your purpose and mission. Instead, your purpose and mission will stop Satan. What the enemy intends for you will happen to him. God is an odds-defying, underdog-empowering, table-turning God. David told Goliath, today I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. David didn't say, and the whole world will know that I should be king. David didn't say, and I will get to give my testimony on national television. David said, the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. And we get too self-focused. Say like, think what I'll be able to do when I defeat my giant. Think what people will say about me. Think about how many people will read my book. God gives you the power, not to elevate yourself, but to elevate him. Giants are defeated to glorify God, not to build a name for you. When your giant is defeated, everyone around you will know your God is powerful and alive. If you take credit for what God did, you'll soon be facing the same giant you thought you were strong enough to defeat. David stood before the massive giant unintimidated. Intimidation is our major challenge when we face giants. When you are intimidated, your thoughts get confused. You forget how to pray. You focus on the odds against you. You forget whom you represent, and you stand there shaking in fear. When you get intimidated, you back away from the fight. But David wasn't intimidated. He was serving notice on his giant. And I love this. Today, I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth. And the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know this is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's. David gave God the glory before the battle even began, because David's eyes weren't on Goliath. His eyes were fixed on God. He said, I don't need a spear. I don't need a sword, because it's not my battle. The battle is the Lord's. Are you trying to do your own battle? Trying to fight it your way? Trying to outsmart the enemy, outfox him? You can't. But God can. God is saying to you, do it my way, and I'll honor you. Do it your way, you're doomed to fail. The battle is not yours. The battle is mine. The obstacle doesn't look near as big when you stack it against the big God who owns the battlefield. Measure the size of your obstacle against the size of your God. The battle belongs to the Lord. We tend to measure our obstacles against our own strength. We often feel overwhelmed and defeated before the battle begins. And I'm not suggesting if you measure your obstacles against God, your battle will be effortless. David still had to face his giant obstacle and use the strength he possessed. But his confidence wasn't in himself. David knew that although Goliath was big, he knew his God was bigger. And David declared, you come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will hand you over to me, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. Today I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds of the air and the beasts of the earth, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands. And right here, we see something new in the speech. David said, all of you and ours. All of a sudden, David revealed his agenda. David wasn't just speaking to the giant. This wasn't just about one big guy against one little guy. This was not trash talking. This was a team building, energizing, empowering moment. With this speech, David was serving notice on an entire army. In fact, this shepherd boy was serving notice on 2 armies. He was saying to the Philistines, look out, guys. We're coming for you. He was saying to the Israelites, hey, guys, did you hear that? I'm going to beat this guy, and then you're going to help me beat all the rest of them. David was acting like everyone in the Israelite camp was with him. He was ignoring his critics and doing what leaders do. David was leading. Facing the giant has a far-reaching effect. It's not just about one giant. It's not an isolated battle. God's agenda goes beyond one giant. God will help you defeat your giant. But God is also going to use that to help others win the victory. It's not an isolated event. When you defeat your giant, other people will be encouraged and inspired to believe with God's help, they too can defeat their giant. A year ago, Emily and I received some news that was a giant in our lives. Emily was diagnosed with PCOS, stands for polycystic ovarian syndrome. Due to this condition, Emily's doctors told her she had probably never ovulated and likely never would on her own. This was extremely tough to hear. Emily had dreamed about being a mom her entire life, and we had been unsuccessfully trying to have a child for a while. With this diagnosis, we were essentially told we would never become parents on our own. And that was the beginning of a long journey. We told a few people initially, but kept things pretty quiet. It's not the kind of thing you discuss casually or even publicly. In fact, this is the first time we have publicly told this story. As our journey began with testing and appointments, my dad preached a message in which he prayed for people struggling to have children. Emily and I were prayed for that day. And soon after, we were sent to a fertility specialist to undergo extensive testing and begin fertility treatments. Over the course of the next few months, Emily began taking multiple medications to help regulate the imbalances in her system and enable her to ovulate. As time went on, things just seemed to be getting worse and not better. One medication failed, then another, until we were on our 3rd medication combination. I was continually failing as we increased the dose month after month. At this point, we received a dismal report telling us that if this last dose did not work, the next steps did not look good, and the specialist did not know how comfortable she would be moving forward. We eventually sought another opinion from a second specialist, but it was getting hard to hold on to hope. It's getting hard to hold on that things would all work out. With each ultrasound and a lab report with negative results, our disappointment grew. In the midst of the fear and frustration, after a long week full of more bad reports from the doctor, Emily stood up on stage at our Little Rock campus on a Sunday morning to lead worship and sang this song.
Grander earth has quaked before, moved by the sound of his voice. Seas that are shaken and stirred can be calmed and broken for my regard. Through it all, my eyes are on you. Through it all, it is well. Through it all, my
The next week, we walked into the doctor's office to more bad news. This was the final course of this medicine the doctor would allow us to try. If we didn't see an egg, we would have to move to alternative methods that were much more expensive and much riskier. With this firmly in our heads, praying harder than I think we ever have, the doctor performed the ultrasound and announced there was nothing. He could see no evidence of a response of any kind. We were devastated. The doctor laid out our next steps. We didn't know what to do. We left his office, went to my car, and cried. And we wondered what the next step was. As we began to talk through scenarios, Emily and I looked each other in the eye. It said, no matter what happened, it changed nothing. If we never had a child, our faith would remain unchanged. If our dream of a family never went forward, we would still declare that the Lord is faithful. Our dream was not bigger than his plans. I remember that afternoon, walking into Pastor Rod's office, my dad. I walked in. He didn't know what was happening yet. I laid my head down on his desk and I began to cry. I tried really hard to be strong for Emily and not cry, but this time I couldn't control it. I was heartbroken, and I didn't know what we were going to do. And I knew that I was about to be faced with some tough decisions I was unsure about. And based on those decisions, we may or may not be able to have a child. I sat there in his office and cried. With all the bad news, Emily and I also decided that we were not at the point where we should give up. As we prayed, we determined that we would continue to move forward until we felt a sense from God to stop. We decided that it was our time to share our journey, and we needed an army of prayer warriors on our side. We tearfully admitted the reality of what we were facing, but we were not going to give up because we knew we served a giant defeating God. And through it all, we could trust him, regardless of the journey or the outcome. We called in the prayer warriors with a renewed sense of peace and determination to trust God and follow his leading. About 4 hours later, I received a call from Emily. She was crying uncontrollably, and understandably, I feared the worst. But this time, the tears were different. She said, the doctor just called. He said not to change anything because the blood test came back and it finally worked. He was wrong. I ovulated before we even went to the appointment. All hope seemed lost. And a mere 4 hours later, hope was restored. A month later, thanks to an army of people praying among our family, friends, a Wednesday night group at our Little Rock campus, and a faithful God, we learned that Emily was pregnant. Our baby girl, Evie, is due in February. We serve a giant defeating God. All around you are people who are facing giants. There's also people who have faced giants. Everyone's journeys and battles are different, but the giant defeaters are here to tell you, face it with faith. God is on your side, and you will overcome this giant in his strength. Would God let Emily and I, a year ago, begin this journey and face our giant so that a year later, I could stand on this stage. And there'd be somebody in the crowd who said, and came to church today, said, all hope is lost. There is no chance for this. There's no way I can overcome this. And to hear our story and realize there is a God and there is a hope, and hope can be restored. I think you would. Through our journey, there was one thing that got us through, and it was our reliance on prayer. Prayer prepares you for battle. And after the journey, I feel like I have a renewed sense of what praying really is. Everyone's giants are different. We all face different things at different points in our lives, but there's something that is always the same, no matter what your giant is. That God is on your side, and he is able to defeat your giant with you. So today, if all hope seems lost, if you've been facing your giant or you haven't even faced it yet, because you don't know if there's a chance you can make it, I'm here to tell you, our God is able.